Well, good afternoon again, and a warm welcome to this afternoon's seminar at the Institute of South Asian Studies. We have the pleasure of having with us Professor Panta Murali Prasad from the Indian Institute of Technology at Kanpur. The biosketch provided is really brief and pithy, and you seldom see that in academia. So just reading between the lines and after a brief chat with Professor Prasad, turns out he comes with a very rich background in economics, in public policy, and then you read law and economics at Hamburg. And I must admit, my first instinct when I read the abstract was that this was in the domain of environmental sciences and engineering, and my hunch did indeed turn out to be true. Professor Prasad is working with a cohort of MTech students who've been going around in major cities in India, particularly Chennai and Kanpur, Hyderabad, and other places, and digging up soil samples to ascertain the quality of the soil and toxicity, amongst other things, the issues, and then drawing public policy implications from that. So this is an area, of course, where there's great need for research. One of the things that we keep on hearing about is arsenic poisoning, and for instance, Bangladesh, that's a very major concern, and the toxicity that it results in. So it's intriguing to see why cadmium is such a major issue. One of our colleagues, actually, from Australia is not present, Professor Robin Jeffrey, has recently done an extensive work on the worlds of waste in India. And one of the issues that they looked at was how old mobile phones are recycled, and the toxins released from that very often, this is done in the household sector, is cadmium and nickel, which again is very difficult to get rid of. So your research very much follows in that domain and hopefully provides answers to that. So without much ado, Professor Prasad, we have roughly 40 minutes or so. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for nice introduction, and good afternoon to all of you. At its initial stage, my voice will be very slow, but over the time period, it will pick up. So I hope it is fine with you. I'm happy to be with you. I am here to share my work with you and seek some kind of suggestions to improve the quality of the work. So this is the main aim of I'm being here. I really thank the ISAS giving this opportunity for me. And with these few words, I would like to begin my presentation. I hope if it is louder enough, I would like to stand and then speak this thing rather than in front of the mic. Basically, the topic is Sustainable Development Cities, a case study of Indian mega cities.
Sorry, it's not audible. Would you mind? You can take the mic and pick up the mic. And
okay.
If that's
even I can sit, not an issue. So I have initiated this study when I was doing World Bank project on environmental quality improvement at way 2000. And when I was collecting cases from Supreme Court of India in its case files room, I got one case, Delhi industrial pollution case. And there, that case really talks about the violation of zoning policy, particularly the hazardous industries. They are functioning in residential zones and then contaminating the natural resources. And that basically gave a motivation. Once after I joined IIT Kanpur, end of 2003, I applied for a small grant and I obtained that. And that gave me to have interaction with urban development authorities, 6 mega cities. And while I was doing that work, then one MTech student showed interest to work on this. Then I gave him Delhi as a city specific. That was in 2007. Then consequently, a project and few more MTech students worked on it. And it is almost all a decade plus kind of work, because it is not a continuous one. Why it is not continuous one? In 2005, we have introduced one MSc Economics Integrated 5 years program. And that program really needed much of our time in teaching on an average 5 courses per semester from 2008 to 2013. So once you be starting your semester with teaching, then you won't get time to go to the field and collect the data. So only we get during the summers really to do your work. So all these things really contributed a lengthy time period in order to share the work which I did so far. So with this, the outline of the presentation, I would like to spend a few minutes on, would like to speak few minutes on background, and then what is the problem and what's the objective, and then specifically how the cities, particularly in India, they are using the natural resources and what is the problem and what's kind of impact on households, and then few discussions and conclusions and references and acknowledgements. So begin with background. Till Modi government formation, we had 5 years plans. And starting from 1950, even up to 2017, 12th 5-year plan, the economy has grown from 1950-51, $23 billion to 2015-16, roughly around $2,200 billion. So that is the quantum of the development, economic growth and development. And the services providing larger share to the GDP to that of the agriculture and industry. In addition to it, there is a sluggishness in the 5-year plans. Out of 12 plans, 5 plans haven't reached the targets. 2, 3, 4, 9, and 10. So this plans not reached the target. The reasons could be over the time period, environmental degradation, jobless growth, non-performance assets. There are several reasons there is a sluggishness in the economy. Particularly, we are going to focus on environmental degradation. So by saying that the environmental degradation, as I mentioned, that Delhi industrial pollution case, in a simple sense, when we talk about Delhi, the Delhi Development Authority established 1957, and it had formulated 3 master plans. Before master plan, the land use is free. That means I can construct hazardous industry next to your house. But once after master plan, so the hazardous industries which are in residential zones, either they close down or they shift to industrial zone. Depends upon the intensity of hazardousness, 3 years, 6 years, 9 years. But over the time period, this industry is not shifted. That was the reason why there was a public interest litigation case in 2005, and it dragged in up to 2004. 20 years it took, give an order. Around 700 plus hazardous industries were closed in 2004 based on the Supreme Court order. And in the meantime, there was also study, Central Groundwater Board and Central Pollution Control Board, joint study, 2000 year they published, and that publication gave us some information. Within Delhi, there are 6 water blocks. And this study shows us the heavy metals, particularly cadmium, chromium, nickel, lead. All 6 blocks, over and above the WHO drinking water standards. So this really gave us some motivation, intuitivity. If Delhi is, the case is like this, then what about other cities like Mumbai, Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, Calcutta? So that really gave an intuition to look into those cities. And while looking at, this is the problem which we looked into it. We have urban land use, and segregation industrial zones and residential zones, and zoning policy violation. And this violation contaminates, specifically we are going to talk about groundwater contamination. And when groundwater contaminated, then the water boards in a given city not supplying sufficient drinking water to the households, then there is a water scarcity. They can't use the groundwater within their premises because of the contamination, if they have that information. Okay. And at the same time, the water boards, they are not supplying sufficient water to the households. They are spending more money going to the market and purchasing the water bottles. And in a given year, whatever they spent, that much money is not available with them for other purposes like kids' education. So that is where, in economic term, we call it as opportunity cost of groundwater contamination. So we are really looking at, in general, whether there is a violation of zoning policy or not, number one. Number two, if there is a violation, then which are the areas, collect the water samples from those areas, and test it in the Environmental Engineering and Management Lab at IIT Kanpur. Then look at, compare with it WHO drinking water standards. If the parameters are over and above the drinking water thing, then look at the water supply system in that city, whether there is a scarcity in supplying of fresh water to the households or not. If there is, then how they are filling the gap, households are filling the gap, demand-supply gap. Then if they are buying it, so they are spending the money out of pocket. So that much money is not with them. That is what we are really doing it. Okay. So we really would like to give some kind of design incentives to the economic agents to promote sustainable development in India. The broader objectives to find out the groundwater contamination, particularly heavy metals, in the cities like Bangalore, Chennai, and Hyderabad, and then find out which city is more vulnerable and have intensive, extensive study in that city, and within that city, which area is more vulnerable, and then look at the opportunity cost of that, and then to very preliminary manner to look at mortality and morbidity, particularly morbidity costs in specific health costs, and then how much man-days they lose because of their sickness. This is what the total nutshell of the work. When we talk about urban natural resources, as we really discussed, that each and every city formulates master plans. And cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, they formulated more than one master plan. But still, the hazardous industries are within the residential zones, and they're working and contaminating. And that really gives the problem. This is particularly Bangalore, and Hyderabad, 2 plants already, and Chennai, basically 1973, 74, and 2006. That 2006 master plan applicable up to 2026. When we look at, particularly in Chennai, we look at the yellow color and pink color. 1973, the pink color is industrial zones and yellow color is residential zone. If we compare these two maps, 1973 to 2006, there is a, you can see the color combinations changing. So either industries are in residential or residences are industry. Whatever it is, so they are going to have some kind of negative externalities. It is going to be there. So this is one. And second, when we are, this is particularly Pammal, that is within Chennai. If we look at 1973, 2006, and 2026 map, then when we talk about the scientific analysis, we have secondary data for collecting from pollution control boards and metropolitan development authorities and central groundwater board, metro water supply and sanitation boards, particularly on what is the water supply, how many hours per week, where the households are really buying it. So some data we get, and master plans. These are the things from secondary data. And when we talk about primary data in scientific analysis concern, to identify the zoning violated areas and go to that area, interact with the households and get their feedback and make sure that there is a violation of zoning policy, and then collect the samples. And initially we limited to Bangalore, Chennai and Hyderabad because of the funds. We not have much funds to do this project, and limited to 20 samples collection from each city. And that was 2008-2012. But we have tested only 10 high-ranking samples from each city. That is 30 samples we tested. Even though we collected total around 59, but we tested it only 30 initially. Then that particular one really gave some information. Then in 2014-15, we collected samples from Chennai, 90 samples, 45 each pre-monsoon and post-monsoon, 15 zoning violated areas, 45 locations for testing of CD, cadmium, chromium, nickel, and lead. These are the initial sample collection sites, like that 69 samples which we collected from these 3 cities. Then the test results really reveals that Chennai is the most vulnerable one in terms of cadmium, lead, and nickel. Like cadmium, it is 16 times over and above the WHO drinking water standards, and lead 17 times, and nickel 17 times comparatively Bangalore and Hyderabad. Hence our focus particularly on Chennai. So when we talk about Chennai, this is where the 2014-15 sample collection, 45 locations and 15 areas within Chennai. The test results of this 90 samples, it really gives us information. Pammal, Vellivakkam, and Ambattur. These were the 3 most vulnerable areas within Chennai in heavy metals concentrations. Then we look at what is the water supply system in Chennai. So this gave us some information about Chennai gets water from surface, groundwater, and sea water desalination. These 3 ways, and they can mobilize the water resources roughly around 1,950 MLD per day. That is what they have they can have the resources, but they are not harvesting fullest to the extent. In 2014, whatever the water they have supplied to the households, it is around 350 MLD per day. So this was the things, and then they also getting water from Krishna River, the neighborhood Andhra Pradesh, which is 400 kilometers away from Chennai. 12 TMC water they are getting, and also the city, the water board, particularly Chennai Metro Water Supply and Sanitation Board, they are having individual contracts with the neighborhood farmers and getting water to the city from the water wells. So it is really, the water is also very scarce resource in Chennai. It is not only the preliminary studies shows us that the groundwater contamination is high, and water scarcity is also very high in Chennai compared to Bangalore and Hyderabad. That's what our study reveals. And particularly in 2004 and 2005, they had very tough time. The surface water resources dried up. They relied upon groundwater resources, mobile water tank, through water tank. That's why the prices shoots up maybe roughly around $1 Singapore per kiloliter. The cost to the water supply board. Okay. Then when we come to the number 1, groundwater contamination. Number 2, water scarcity. Then no choice to the households. to fill the demand-supply gap, particularly drinking water, going to the informal water market and purchase at high price. So that really gave us a motivation to look at the economic analysis, particularly opportunity cost of groundwater contamination. So when we want to do, in a simple sense of opportunity cost of groundwater contamination, we look at how many people are really purchasing the drinking water, and we multiplied with average consumption of water per day and with the average cost of canned water per liter. So this is how we get this opportunity cost of groundwater contamination. And particularly this health risk assessment, it is limited to Pammal in Chennai, not to the other cities and other areas. There again we looked at Delhi, and again not premature mortality, that is years life lost, but only with disability, years lost due to disability. We limits that to cover up opportunity cost of groundwater contamination, both mortality, morbidity, only morbidity, within morbidity only health, as well as the years lost due to disability. When we look at the economic analysis, this opportunity cost, that initial study, that 69 samples tested in Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai. The opportunity cost of that study, particularly to the households, the groundwater contamination, in Bangalore it is $0.093 million US that is per year, and Chennai $22.75 million US, and Hyderabad $4.15 million US. The study areas which we have selected, not the whole city. Okay. And this gave us, Chennai is again spending more money. So that means that's why we looked at Chennai more intensive and extensive study. When we look at the, in a very nutshell sense, these are the 15 areas in Chennai city, which we really collected the groundwater samples, 90 groundwater samples, 45 each, pre and post. And the red buttons really reveals that the contamination of groundwater resources with heavy metals, and Pammal is in all cadmium, chromium, nickel, lead. And then we have mentioned Vellivokkam, that is basically, that is chromium, nickel and lead, okay. And one more is Ambattur, okay. So these three. And when we look at this economic analysis of groundwater contamination with heavy metals and its opportunity cost, out of these 15 areas, Sembium is really free from water pollution. And out of 14 areas really have the groundwater contamination. Within these 14 areas, we had a household survey of 800 houses. And we went door to door, and we collected the information about how many socioeconomic data, as well as how they really fill the gap, and how much money they spent, and whether they do have any kind of health problems like skin problem, or what are the health costs kind of thing. But this health costs and skin problem, again, we limited only to Pammal, not other areas. And the last column, it reveals, it is in rupees, in year, opportunity cost of groundwater contamination in millions, okay? And when we convert that into US dollars, at the rate 62.46 rupees per US dollar, we get 35.12 million US dollars, the Chennai. That again, our study says 40% of the households, by ignorance, they don't have information, or they don't have the ability to pay for the water cost. So they really doing some traditional methods like boiling, filtering with cloth. They are using their own traditional methods, and they are still drinking that. And majority of the households also, they are really using this water for washing utensils and washing clothes, and then take bath. So all these things, still majority of the percentage of the households, they are doing it. That really, if there are such things happens, then we are sure there is a problem of health costs. Okay. This is just, we attempted to see the dependent variable opportunity cost of groundwater contamination, how it is going to have some impact on the independent variables like metro water supply, when family members are more, when kids are more, and income groups like lower economically weaker sections and higher income group, even middle income group, we split it into two, higher middle income group and lower middle income group. So what kind of burden of incidents when they are spending more money on water purchasing, how it is, we looked into those things also, and whether they are really using water purification devices, where if they use it, then they can eliminate the contamination and then they can drink it. But the fixed costs are more in the case of RO system, and also variable cost every per annum. You may have to spend 1,000 Singapore dollars for annual maintenance contract. Okay, these are certain things which it comes, and this analysis really gave us that water supply, metro water supply, and water purification device, and income groups. These three variables have really very high significant effect. If more water supply they receive from the metro water, then there will be less opportunity cost of groundwater contamination. And when you use devices, water purification devices, then it really neutralizes. You don't need to care about what the contamination it is. And then again, income groups, economically weaker sections, the utility of money, 1 rupee is more to that of the rich. So the burden will be very high. And our study says around 70% of the households, they falls under economically weaker section and lower middle income group. So this is what the thing is. And water purification devices, only 10% of the households of the survey, they are really using it. Then when we talk about the health risk assessment, we particularly looked at the skin diseases, not any other thing, and again specific to the pummel. So Chennai, Hyderabad, Bangalore. Chennai is the most, and within Chennai, more intensive study. Within Chennai, pummel is the vulnerable, and within pummel we look at again 220 household survey for opportunity cost, particular groundwater contamination. Again, the morbidity costs, health costs, and then the years lost due to disability by using daily kind of thing. This is one of the household. She stays 30 years in the same location, and she uses the water for daily routine thing. And also the global burden diseases, the report also says for adults, if they're continuously using this over 30 years, then there is a high chances of getting the skin diseases and other diseases. And we look at only the households, those who stayed over 30 years. So in order to have that health costs and then the years lost due to disability. Okay. And she is having this disease by the time when we really interacted with her. Last 10 years, she had this skin disease. Okay. This is very simple table. First one talks about the opportunity cost of groundwater contamination analysis, and as per the table, it shows it is 1.18 million US dollars. If you convert the same rate which I have mentioned earlier, 62.46 rupees per the US dollar. And the second one, it really talks about the health costs No, this is basically the years lost due to disability, 4,075 years of the households of 2052. Okay. Yeah. So given this kind of the primary survey as well as laboratory testing of groundwater samples and interaction with metro development authorities and metro water supply and sanitation board authorities and then pollution control board officials, we really comfortable in saying these three things based on our work. One is there is a urgency is required to have some legislation that the city administration should disclose the information to the households. What is the status of their groundwater resources? Usually the city administration, with the help of Central Groundwater Board as well as the Pollution Control Board, they talks about BOD, COD and some pathogens, but not much of the heavy metals. So they do from time to time the testing, but they keep that information with them only. At least my observation reveals that during my study period, I haven't really come across any single city administration really disseminated this information to the households, those who are really facing this kind of challenges. Without information, like 40%, at least our study reveals that 40% of the households, either they are ignorant, but of course, you will get indirectly that when watercolor changes, okay, so then you can really not to drink. Watercolor and smell, that is an indication that there is something is wrong. But it is only at the households level information. But it is not based on the official publication kind of thing. So if they consume, if they contact with this polluted water for long time, if their health deteriorates, then there is an impact on health costs as well as the loss of productivity if they're not going to work, and also loss of income. So if at household level, if we have productivity loss, income loss and health costs, and then again you have to buy the water and you can't buy it because of no information, then what is it is going to be meaning of Make in India program at national level? That is one point. And second point, the Constitution of India provides the fundamental duty to each and every individual of India to protect the environment under Article 51 AG. So if you don't have information, so how you are going to do the duty? That is second point. Okay. And we also really would like to make some manual. The administration should have some manual. They have to test the groundwater sample from time to time. And once after testing it, they need to disseminate the information to the households. When they disseminate the information to the households, they can also find out who are the rogue industries. They are really doing this job, and what kind of products they are producing it. If the households are environmental consciousness and for their own safety, they can boycott those kind of polluted products, so that the industries really can be closed down. So it is not that Pollution Control Board need to get a complaint from households and cut the water supply and electricity. Usually they are not doing it. But if they can publish this kind of information, the environmental consciousness households, they themselves can take the action by not buying polluted products. So this, based on this intuitive and the study-based information, we would like to propose to the policymakers to formulate a legislation mandatory information disclosure rule. It is already there in some countries like United States. If there is hazardous substances, whether you are producing, transporting, storing, you have to 100% to inform to the local authorities. That is a must. They already have that one. If we had that kind of policies, then we could have avoided the generations together the problems of Bhopal gas tragedy. So when it happened on that day, the city administration don't know what's happening. So they don't have any clue why people are really suffering. So these are certain things which we really deliberated while working on this topic, and we really would like to come up with this kind of proposal. That is one. And second, when we talk about metro water supply to the households of zoning violated areas, one of the independent variable like metro water supply really have a strong influence on the dependent variable opportunity cost of groundwater contamination. That if you supply the sufficient fresh water, at least for drinking purpose, okay, then you can eliminate certain opportunity costs. That is one thing. And moreover, Millennium Development Goals also suggest that the city administration should supply 150 liters per capita daily to the households. That is second. And third, the city administration like Chennai, they do have the water resources, but they are not harvesting at the rate of maximum sustainable yield. So if they do the maximum sustainable yield harvest, then they supply. So again, they can mitigate some of the problems of this one. So hence, we really would like to propose metro water supply to the households of particularly at least zoning violated areas. And moreover, our study gives us the information, particularly in Pammal, the Chennai Metro Water Supply and Sanitation Board supplies 1.27 hours per week. So the households in Pammal gets 1.27 hours per week water supply. So these are certain things which we really would like to emphasize on this. And the last one is the first best compatible land use. This concept, we got it from environment and trade, where you have a first best policy and second best policy. The first best policy, not only it is least cost and to mitigate more pollution to that of the second best policy. The first best policy in the sense why we want to propose is that the government of India again come up with 100 cities of smart cities concept. When we talk about smart cities, it is not just limited to the information communication technology or infrastructural development, but also you need to take into the consideration of environment, smart environment kind of thing. In that context, we would like to really create awareness to the polluting industries, what kind of benefits they do get if they mitigate the pollution. Like one is they can get the healthy human capital, the productivity can increase, and the health costs which they need to reimburse to their employees can reduce it. Then the goodwill, the reputation of the industry will goes up. So if you can provide some kind of awareness things to the industries, polluting industries, that look, if you do mitigate the pollution, then you will be better off. Okay, so you need to have that kind of campaign. And second, also one need to be strictly to implement polluter pays principle. Suppose the polluting firms should pay whatever the pollution which they are really imposing on the society. They can pay for this. In the case of Chennai, the RO systems, if each and every households purchase RO systems, then the company, the polluting industry should pay for it, or whatever the cost it is, the households are buying drinking water, they should pay for it, past pollution. And moreover, the smart city definition is not very clear in the case of Indian sense. What basically it is. So, given these things, we really would like to go for the land use regulation, which should be our first best, because whenever they formulate the master plans or zoning policies, they are not taking the feedback from the technical know-how. The engineers, scientists, and social scientists, or even NGOs. That is what I haven't cross-checked with the administration whether they're taking it or not, but the manner in which the things are really revealing to us during our project study period reveals that they're not taking it. But I haven't checked with them personally whether they're taking it or not. So if you won't formulate the first best compatible land use regulation, particularly this regulation should have the concept of ownable, workable, walkable concept. So, and if they can have, they can solve, at least this will give some kind of benefits to the households of these areas, zoning violated areas. So with this, I really thank you once again for providing me an opportunity to interact with you on my work. And I would like to request you to give your ideas or that which we can enhance the quality of the work. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Prasad. That's a very enriching talk, and as you stated at the very outset, you want to raise questions, and it certainly raises a lot of issues which are very pertinent today. But before I start, I just want to record my thanks to Mr. Ye Troyan for bringing you over. Mr. Ye is from the President's office at NUS for International Affairs and a dear friend of ISAS. Thank you. If I may exercise my prerogative and just start off with a couple of suggestions. So I'm not an expert or even remotely acquainted, but there are a couple of ideas that raises. You come from an institute which has a huge reservoir of talent, skills, and technical areas. So I recall at a conference here, there's a study on Chennai on waste. And what they've done is essentially use geographical information systems to map out in a lot of detail where the waste, what kind of waste was being generated at the household level, and then accordingly match that up with where the costs were being imposed. And the people they roped in were even included garbage collectors. Closer to what you're doing, I recall a study done in Manila. Manila's a horribly messed up city with both organic and inorganic waste, with the poor heavily concentrated on the areas where there's water resources. And by again doing a GIS study, they were able to pinpoint, and that's one of the main questions you're raising, who's imposing these costs, which are the polluting industries, and they mostly are in the informal sector, right, beyond the purview of regulators, and where the costs are being imposed. So I'm wondering if that may be of some use. As for the costs, so the proxy that you said you've used is basically to what extent people are switching over to bottled water or getting clean water resources. And another, this is just by way of a suggestion, is by looking at the direct costs. I'll give you an analogy. Diwali is just coming up. It's a nightmare for elderly people and for children in cities like Delhi because of the pollution and the toxins released into the air. So what a friend of mine who's an environmental economist and a scientist is endeavoring to do for a long time actually is look at an indirect measure and look at hospitals, clinics, records, and see how the weather's change, even check on dispensaries, pharmacies, what kind of drugs are being dispensed at what time, and that provides very useful insights again in an indirect manner. That's the closest you can get to where the costs are being imposed. A quick question. Mm-hmm. So the switch to, the reason why bottled water might be issue is water is polluted for organic and inorganic, and what we are looking at here is primarily inorganic. Are there concerns about how do you delineate the effects of two? because organic waste spreads all over, whereas inorganic may or may not. I have no idea about the science and how that is dispersed.
Okay, so I haven't looked at the household waste.
That's complicated.
Yeah,
Not waste,
yeah.
but I mean proxy for that. I thought.
Okay, I'll
Just
look
an
at
idea
Okay,
that
yeah,
you
it's a
may
good
want to
suggestion. Yeah.
consider, and sort of separating between the costs of organic and inorganic
Okay,
waste. So we are looking mostly at inorganic, right?
okay, okay.
And that might be.
Yeah,
So
can I say a few things to you based on your suggestions? One is when we talk about particularly the hospital costs, health costs. I haven't shared the information, particularly in the case of Pamal. 2,052 households incurs healthcare costs around 14.57 million US dollars per year. So that is what our study. Yeah. So we have the health costs. We have, and again the years lost due to disability 4075, and we also 1.18 million per year US dollars, 220 households in Pamal. This is within the Pamal area.
Are you able
So-
to disentangle the cost because of lead, which are very different from chromium and other?
No, not
metals?
that,
That's
not that,
difficult
not
to-
that, not that, not that. Yeah.
I'd like to open up the floor to questions. Yes,
Okay.
Ambassador Chowdhury, please.
You mentioned, Dipinder, at the very outset, this problem of groundwater
Yeah.
poisoning in the Ganges Delta, Bangladesh. It is said to be a function of a very successful World Bank project to deep tube wells which initially supplied very, potable or drinkable water to households. But eventually, ironically, because it's the function of a success of that project, that the water table lowered and arsenic came into this thing. So how is is this related at all, or is there something you can? Is it a part of your study? You haven't
no, I haven't
gone
looked
into
at
that.
it, yes.
Arsenic poisoning.
I think
But this is a very major cause of poisoning in India, Bangladesh, United States, Latin America, isn't it?
Yeah,
Arsenic
it is
poisoning.
right. In India, some parts of the things they do have this problem, arsenic problem. Yeah.
I see. So, this is a natural kind of thing. It has nothing to do with pollution.
Yeah, but from our study, we have limited only to the industrial pollution, particularly to these 4 metals. So not other metals, we haven't looked into it. Even mercury, even we haven't looked into it.
What I'm saying is that it may have nothing to do with metals
Industry.
at all. It will purely be like what's happening in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
It's a very major issue, and it has nothing to do with industrial.
I'm sure there are a lot of studies on arsenic related problems, and already published literature is available. Yeah, it is there.
I didn't realize the World Bank could be.
Yeah, there are lots of
It's
studies.
like a reason for
UNICEF,
the
World
spawn the
Bank,
problem in the first
1990s,
place.
It's a
Yeah.
very, very major
Major
issue.
issue, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. Because I was looking at the headline. The Sustainable Development Cities. While we are sitting over here discussing the merits of sustainable development ideologies, as a layperson, what's the motivation and driving force in India that is really pushing sustainable city development? Is it a slogan? Is it a real push? So that's something that occurs to me after the presentation.
Yeah, there are wide varieties of problems, starting with environmental degradation, law and order problems, and even data generation problem, even the traffic congestions. The vulnerability, there are many. If you take any given city, the most of the public goods they are in the areas of the affluent and rich. The quasi-public goods, it depends upon the consciousness of the households. Particularly private goods, it is very difficult for them, particularly to the economically weaker sections and the lower middle income groups. So when we want to talk about sustainable cities, maybe if we link with smart cities, if we want a general definition of it, when you look at public goods, quasi-public goods, and private goods, these goods and services changes as per the income status of the households of that particular city. If they are rich, then it is the public, quasi-public, and private goods and services are different. And if they are of middle income group and the economically weaker sections. So when we talk about smart cities or sustainable development cities, we need to link into it, these things. And there are certain governments, they're very keen on to enhance the employment rate and also the generation of revenues. In order to do that, they are competing each other in order to giving subsidies to the industries. And when there is a competition among the cities, then the environmental pollution takes backseat. That is one particular angle. It is a debatable kind of thing. We do need the industries to have employment as well as revenue generation, but at the same time, it should not be at the cost of the environment. That is one thing. Second, the present government, when it came to power, it really would like to have try to really solve the household problems, starting with smart cities, or even Make in India program, and even Swachh Bharat. They have this kind of initiatives, and we are really moving towards the right direction. But we have, the problem is severe, and the projects which we proposed, the budget allocation and its implementation, it is not that much rigorous. So there is again gap, the supply gap is there. So hence we are not achieving the manner in which we should achieve it. So there, maybe the government of India thinking that intuiting of the technology will minimize the costs to mitigate. That is where it is really having a policy formulations.
I've actually associated the question, and I'm just thinking. India is really a very old civilization country, right? With small villages. And if you look at the equivalent of Japan and China, they got very, very old cities. What does it take for old cities to do urban renewal? China may take one approach where they do entire zonal redevelopment. Is this a solution for India? But if you look at the way Japan goes about conservation, they have achieved certain measure of success in being sustainable. So what's no, it's just a moot question. What's the likely solution lying ahead for a big populous country like India?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think if we look at the history, like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, we had a very good the town model thing, sanitation and water supply thing. We do had such things. I think there are unexplained errors occurred in the society, and there may be many. If you name it anything, you can say yes for that. That is where we are right now. The only solution is that it is not the government should give the money to the local self-government or to the households, but there shall be some kind of system need to be developed to change the behavior of the households. If you change the behavior of the households, then we will have a rapid the country development, sustainable development. So unless until we change the behavior of the households, even if you pump the money, even if you really establish the technology won't work. And the money, we don't know where it vanishes. Okay, so that is, my opinion is that you need to have some institutional mechanism where you can change the behavior of the households, then we can see the sea change. That's what my perception.
In Singapore, we find.
Can you just clarify? Sorry, please.
Actually, I'm quite disgusted with this study. This happened a long time ago. I happened to be on this, I'm from Singapore. I happened to be on this Madras corridor thing for 10 years. There was a bloody chief minister whom they worshipped. Lalita, something like that?
Pardon?
Yeah, Lalita?
Yes.
Yeah. She attended one meeting and then she sent secretaries to meet us. I said, look, I represent the Singapore government. You understand? What are you doing here? I want to see that your leadership takes charge of this. We are prepared to put in the money to have this Madras corridor. It never worked. I wasted about 5 years or 6 years of my youth trying to teach these buggers. You see? That's not the thing. I think the thing is political. You have a health minister and a cabinet. What the hell is he doing for a program for the whole country? Then you have every state and you have a health minister there. What the bloody hell is he doing? This is quite aware. What you have said has happened. You know the Bhopal incident, which is still suffering, and that was a Western investment. So that has to be a political strength which must be convinced that they have to do this for their own country. And only then it can happen. If the authorities just sit around and don't press the municipalities to do their work, which is their responsibility, then it cannot go. We have our own experience in our own growth in this little country that we call Singapore. And you can go around, you can see anything, you can drink water from the tap anywhere. Why? It's not happened overnight. It's happened because there's a positive work done on this, and that's the responsibility, firstly, of the authorities. You are elected there. What the bloody hell are you doing about it? So I think the emphasis should be on the authorities, that this is their duty, just as you defend your country is your duty. You clean the rivers, that's your duty. And then you can give it down to the organizations that are using that river. Why haven't you moved up for the last 20 years these factories that are on the Ganga? Now come on, man. This is where, what action is being taken? And that's a political matter, I think, you know. Thank you. I'm sorry I overbursted, but they wasted a lot of my time.
No. No, these are all facts. I think it is not kind of anger or emotion kind of thing. These are the facts, and Indian people are living with that kind of situation, and they are also not happy with it. But there is some kind of re-rated problem persist, or collective action problem persist. There is some people are holding up something, and some people are waiting. Why should I need to do it? Others will do it, and nobody is doing it. So unless, and that is where there is the change should comes from households. So then it will work. So what kind of things we need to really do in order to change the households? You are right, sir. This Dutch government spends money on arsenic problem in Nalgonda, Andhra Pradesh. When I was doing PhD, I went along with my supervisor for field work, and they gave the money to each and every village panchayat. They installed, they gave the fixed costs. Okay, this is the technology available. We are installing it, but you only to do the maintenance. They haven't done that. They haven't done that. Okay. And there are, and even Ganga. the Ganga Action Program during late Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi spends around 2,000 crores of rupees to establishment of effluent treatment plants, particularly from Kanpur, where I am coming from. They established the ETPs, and the ETPs, the waste generated is more than the capacity of ETPs, number one. Number two, there is a power crisis problem. You don't have the electricity to run the ETP 24/7. And when the government gives the money for diesel purchase and run this thing, they won't run it. So when this kind of things are occurring, and the Ganga remains polluted. So these are certain things which it persists. So what kind of system we need to adapt in order to change them is a kind of Amravati. Yes.
And Babu Naidu has come here many times. We have someone from our university who's on his board.
Okay.
I think Mr. Chaudhary is on his board.
I just met him.
No, he's just come back from over there. He's in this other committee that I sit with. But since they're starting at the beginning, and this is the right time to do it, and once one township does it, a main city, a capital city, a new capital city becomes a smart city, it will be an example to the whole of India. Everybody else will say, these fellows have done it, why have you buggers been not doing anything?
Yes.
I think this is a very good opportunity.
Yes.
But you should take it up.
If they
Thank you.
have this arsenic poisoning, then what do you do? That
Yeah,
is my
yeah, that's
question.
the critical.
See, because that is more likely to happen than not.
Yeah. Indeed. There's a question from the back, please.
My name is Vijay Saluja. I also, like him, studied in Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. And I have been connected with the management of cities right in all my career, because I superannuated as chief engineer of the New Delhi Municipal Council. I am very happy and to say that the gentleman who spoke, and we are on the same wavelength. Why? Because we academics and the people who are in the field and who are bureaucrats, who are in the political, who are corporate, they are only walking in their own separate compartments. In the parallel, they don't meet. And even if they try to meet, there are always obstructions not to meet. My point is, now in all my career, I myself have contributed more than 50 papers, and I consider it a waste of time, because there have been umpteen number of conferences, panel discussions, seminars, commissions, blah, 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 and technology. But our cities are becoming worse by the day. Unlivable. I'm talking about Delhi. Look at Bombay. It is just yesterday, the MRT or the metro stations is like river, you know. I mean, I have the video, it is just like river. And it is today also, it is raining heavily. Same thing is happening at Calcutta. My question is this: how do we do it? When you talk about, the old cities, today's cities have no comparison with those type of situation. I, as an academic also, when I go to IIT Delhi, I always say, of what use are those examples when today's cities are much different? I mean, they are of no use. I tell my civil engineering professor that because I have been in the local governance all my life, the major problem is a lack of skills, the lack of motivation, commitment, passion, and integrity. You rightly said, where are the funds going? You tell me. The need is of optimum utilization of funds in a proper way, in a sustainable way, in a well thought about manner. It's not happening. Let's face it. It is not a problem just of Delhi or India or Singapore or Thailand or different countries. It is our common problem when we share our resources, skill, everything. I think we should adopt the best practices. And I am an unabashed admirer of Singapore because I have been managing our due daily, trying to manage, but the only thing, if you manage properly, is only you get obstructions.
So,
So
sorry.
this is my point is, finally I will do it.
question, if you would.
Let us also debate this point, as he rightly said, come out with a solution so that the ground realities change. Nothing more, because it's a very wide subject. Thank you very much.
So I guess if I may just interpose on your behalf, I mean, the question is that, I mean, the research is, you'd concur it's a critical input, at least to understanding the problem. Why is it on the policy making front there's an abject lack of?
Yeah.
As much a rhetorical question. in
So
the
I have
context
two
as-
things to say. One is there is an external pressure, particularly when we talk about environmental quality improvement in India, through the international conventions and conferences. India is signatory, like what present government Modi is talking about, global warming, climate change. Even US takes back, but the Indian leadership really would like to continue with it. What it means is that the UN Earth Summits gave some kind of thinkingness towards to change the constitutional provisions in order to protect environment. And also in 1985, N.D. Tiwari committee, after Congress win the elections, to really suggest you need to have some separate environmental protection codes at that time. But it came only in 2010 in the form of National Green Tribunal. So there were people have some vision and they put it in record. But when it is going to happen, there is something which we are unable to answer it. That is one thing. And second one, which we would like to emphasize, the comparing with Mohenjo-daro, Harappa and the present cities, and the role of the academicians. I think I'm glad that you from IIT system and you know that the code of conduct of the teachers there. When you do research, when you experience the real situation problems, and you have some kind of vision to give some kind of solutions. But there is some kind of, you can't really mix with politicians or mix with to lobby for that. There is some kind of code of conduct it really prevents. You can't really side with either BJP or side with either this thing. What I mean to say is that if you are going on more and more times interacting with one minister or the ministers of a given party, we are not doing it first of all. Number one. Even if we do it, then there may be coloring to that kind of thing. And the third one is that we are not doing the interventionist research. Once we identify this, you apply for further research and what kind of solutions, what kind of things, if you really give it to the households, the problem will be solved. So we need to look at the problem, analyze it, and then how this problem could be solved. So whether you can, till the problem solve, can you put your efforts in your research? That is where another thing. Either you lobby with the policymakers, or you can get funds and then to do it on your own to solving that problem. Suppose take an example of there's a water supply or RO system purchase or giving information to them, these are the problems are there. How the problems we can solve and what kind of efforts we need to put it. And you can see change, whether there is any change after certain time period. Let us say 2-3 years, after 2-3 years, when you intervene and then solve it, and what's the results. at least this, I am interested even this Pammal, Vallivakam and Ambattur. These three areas. After this, if it is acceptable to the August gathering here, and there is a sense to go ahead, I would like to really apply for a project and get some funds and go to the households and then try to understand how this problem could be solved at household level. Forget about at the administration kind of thing. That is what I am having in my mind. Let me see how it goes further.
Any questions? We really hope, in fact, on the last point, something along those lines comes through.
Yeah,
and as you pointed out, this is a very critical input.
Yes.
This is the first step in understanding.
Yes,
Micro-level studies are the first step in getting a handle on what the problem is and at what juncture, what levels it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, they talk about academic-industry interaction. Right now, it is across, at least among IITs and centrally funded institutions. And they should also talk about the not only industry, but also to the local self-governments. The academic and local self-government interaction, and then to give them the facts, okay, and then also what kind of solutions are available, how much it costs, and what is the time plan, and how need to be implement those things. If we can give the blueprint and convince them, then they will do it. And we don't know how many of us, at least in India, really doing that thing. So let we see how it goes further, at least in this topic is concerned. Thank you.
Well, we'll hold out hope, certainly. I think there's these sort of studies and the work at Center of Science and Environment and other places certainly is a promising start. Once again, thank you very much, President Prasad.
Thank you very much.
On
I'd like to
behalf
also
of,
thank
thank you.
Mr. N, because when I contacted him, I requested him, I'm going to be in Singapore. Is there any possibility to interact with colleagues in US? And he kindly really put it in the right person.
kind of him
And
too.
Jordan is also really another person who helped a lot. And thank you.
Thank you again. On behalf of ISAS, this is a customary thing to look on geopolitics of energy. Thank you very much again.
Nice.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.